I'm Em Sauter, better known as Pints and Panels.
And I'm Don Tess, better known as the Dawn of Beer.
Welcome to the 18th episode of the All About Beer podcast. Every 2 weeks, we talk with leading experts and take a deep dive into one topic in beer. Visit allaboutbeer.com and follow us on social media at allaboutbeer. And if you're feeling generous, throw us a couple dollars at our Patreon, patreon.com/allaboutbeer to support this show and others. This week on the show, we're going to talk about glassware. Don, I know you have a favorite glass. What do you typically drink out of when you're at home?
You're going to regret asking that question because, of course, I'm going to go deep dive.
Well, I was saying, and I was like, maybe I shouldn't ask this question.
4 hours later. Like most things, I think that there's an appropriate glass. I have a favorite glass for different styles of beer, but my most kind of common, my universal glass, I have these tall glasses that are sort of hourglass shaped. They're narrow in the middle and bulbous at the top. And I like the different widths of it because then I can see different colors. I like the bulbous top because it captures the aromas and forms a head. And I like how tall it is because one of the things I love is watching the beating in the glass. And I like how, if people haven't noticed, the bubbles get faster the higher it goes, and they get bigger the higher it goes. And so I like tall glasses for that. But how about you, Em?
I'm not going to be as fancy as you. I mean, I normally just drink out of a juice jar or a mason jar, but I do have a really nice, I know, but it's utility, it's a good glass for sharing. If you're sharing a can, that's what glassware is about. We're going to get into a great conversation with two guests where we're going to talk about glassware. Is it important or not?
I just want to confirm, though, that when you drink out of a juice jar, you take the juice out first.
Oh,
right?
yes. Yeah. Well, I mean, sometimes if I'm drinking hazy IPA, it looks like juice. It's a secret. I do like Belgian glassware as well. I mean, they really know what they're doing. The branding, the styling. I mean, it's just, I mean, they get it. They really get it. It's classy. So we'll introduce our guests and get into a conversation. But first, if you'd like to help support the All About Beer podcast, reach out to podcast@allaboutbeer.com.
All About Beer is back, and we're asking for your support to help provide the independent beer media this rich and colorful industry deserves. Visit our website, allaboutbeer.com, where we're frequently posting new content. And please consider throwing us a few bucks at patreon.com/allaboutbeer. We have low-cost memberships for individuals and small and large companies alike. Every dollar goes to help produce new articles and podcasts.
Estrella Galicia is an independent, family-owned brewery in northwest Spain, founded in 1906. Estrella Galicia Cerveza Especial is a world-class lager, brewed using the finest Spanish malts, locally cultivated Galician hops, and the best brewing practices made out of the state-of-the-art facility in A Coruna. Recognized around the world for quality and exceptional character, Estrella Galicia is a beer like no other. To learn more about Estrella Galicia, follow them at Estrella Galicia USA on Instagram.
Attention all managers and team leaders. Are you looking to provide your staff with the best training in the beer industry? Look no further than the Beer Savvy Online by the Cicerone Certification Program. With their online training, your team can master the fundamentals of excellent beer service, beer styles, and flavor in just a few hours. Plus, you can monitor their learning progress as a manager. And here's some exciting news. Saturday, April 22nd, is Beer Clean Glass Day, a day that celebrates the importance of clean glassware in beer service. What better way to mark this occasion by ensuring your team is well trained in all aspects of beer service, including maintaining clean glassware. By completing the Beer Savvy course, your team can earn a globally recognized beer industry credential and set your business apart as a leader in the industry. To learn more about Beer Savvy Online and group training options, visit cicerone.org and click on the group training button. Give your staff the tools they need to succeed in the beer industry today.
Max Finnance is a Master Cicerone, Master BJCP judge, and most recently a certified Pommelier. Ooh, fancy. Way to go, Max. He is a senior manager of education and training for Artisanal Brewing Ventures, ABV, and also volunteers with the Brewers Association's mentorship program. He lives in Connecticut with his wife, 2 dogs, and far more glassware than any household could ever justify. He can be found on social media and Instagram, especially at Max Finnance. Welcome to the show, Max.
Thank you so much for having me. Happy to be here.
So I guess I have a very important first question, which is glassware important?
So, all right, to jump right into it, I think glassware is exactly as important as you think it is, which is to
Oh.
say both yes and no. Uh,
Okay.
I think one of the really important things that glassware does is it shows you how much attention the person who's serving you a beer is paying to that beer. So just putting it in a glass is already superior to putting it in a plastic cup. As the glass gets fancier, you perceive that your host is paying more attention to the beer, and that counts for something for sure. But I've seen some evidence that the actual shape of the glass, the style of the glass, doesn't have an impact on your perception of the beer if you can take the subconscious out of things. So the reality is that you can't take the subconscious out of things, so it starts to matter, even though maybe it shouldn't. Does that make sense? Is that too much to start with?
Well, I kind of want to talk about what evidence. So you say that there's evidence that the glassware doesn't actually matter, or like it could matter or not, depending on like, where you are. Well, like, when Max and I have been to Belgium together, and you go to Belgium and you get these beautiful, like, or go into Orval, and having a glass in that Orval green glass is, it heightens everything. But what evidence is there that, maybe that's, just fanciness and luxury? What am I missing here?
Well, it comes down to, the science goes back to the guys like Charles Spence. Dr. Bill Simpson, who runs the Aroxa classes, is a big proponent of this, and they will say that if you can put a human in a box, basically, and blindfold them, and they don't get to see the glass and they don't get to touch the glass, both important because you consume and your brain is forming all these opinions about aroma and taste based on all of the other aspects that are around it. But if you can put a human in a box, blindfolded, and they don't get to touch the glass, then their sensory perception of the beer will be identical, whether it's from a shaker pint glass or a Belgian tulip. Which is pretty wild, I know. But the reality, like I said, is that humans don't consume beer that way. So once you get to see the glass and once you get to touch the glass, then things like a thinner lip and a stem and a fancy design or a logoed glass, as is so popular in Belgium, those start to come into your perception, and you realize that the more attention the bar or your host pays to the glass, the better the overall experience is.
Do you happen to know in that study, did they only talk about flavor perception, or did they also talk about aroma? And the reason I ask is that I think some glassware manufacturers would say, oh, we have this narrow opening and that concentrates the aroma or whatever.
I don't have a good answer for that, Don, and I wish I did. I've tried to find the study myself, and so I'm going on secondhand knowledge here. But I have read Charles Spence's books, and I've taken Dr. Simpson's week-long course, and I have the utmost faith in what these guys say about sensory, and everything else seems to support this idea. And both of those gentlemen pay so much attention to aroma on top of flavor that I think it would be silly if it didn't pay attention to aroma. Right. But if the color of your plate can change how much you enjoy your dessert, it sort of seems to make sense to me that the shape of the glass is going to change how much you enjoy your beer, even if it does nothing for the actual sensory experience.
Right.
Or at least the way your nose works, maybe, is a better way to put that.
So the glassware, so like when glassware has like an inward taper for snifters and whatnot, that's not concentrating the aroma? Or like large fishbowl glasses, like a Belgium, like a chalice glass with big foam. I guess that's all visual.
Well, sorry to interrupt. I think it all goes back to this idea that if you think it matters, it does matter. So if we assume that the inward taper concentrates the aroma, then we're probably going to pick up more heightened aromatics in that glass. And that's not you being crazy or being, tricked into the placebo effect. That's just the complicated way that the brain works.
Well, you used a phrase there that I love, placebo effect. The placebo effect is a real thing, right? So people very often discount placebo effect, but why? It's a real thing. And so, like you say, difference in glassware might be placebo effect. And I'm like, yeah, that's great.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's nothing wrong with placebo effect, right? I think we should even take advantage of it where we can, and knowingly manipulating that. And I think manipulating has a dirty connotation to it, but I don't even mean it that way. But sort of, if you're running a bar, if you're serving someone else a beer, and you get to do things that are going to heighten their experience, it would be a shame for you not to do them, right?
Right.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. No, I mean, there's nothing like having I keep thinking of, when we were in Belgium, and the glassware is so beautiful and so taken care of, regardless of, I've been to dive bars in Belgium where they gave me the most beautiful chimay I've ever seen in my life. And so it's really interesting how each culture has kind of this thing with where, like in America, you go to a bar and you order a beer and it comes in a different brewery's glassware. And it may or may not be clean, who knows? Whereas, and there's so many different versions of each country's glassware. That's really, really fascinating, and it's very regional. And I love it. I love it so much.
Yeah, and I think that gets back to the point that how a bar or a restaurant treats their glassware shows you something about how they care about the beer service overall. And one thing that I've been to a lot of bars in Belgium, as well as some with you and some without you. And one thing that I've noticed is I don't think I've ever found a dirty draft line there, right? And I don't think I've ever been served a dirty glass there. And so them starting with every brand gets its own individual logoed glassware is not the starting point and the ending point. It's just indicative of this overall cultural appreciation for beer and appreciation for taking care of the beer and proper service, right? So many bars you go to in America, you get a dirty glass, you get beer from a dirty draft line, and then by the time it gets to you in a shaker pint with the wrong logo on it, that's just sort of the last strike or the last flag that you get to spot as an indicator that beer maybe isn't their top priority.
My rule is, if there are more people in the bar drinking bottles, you don't order the draft.
That's a good rule.
That's the rule. Do you have a favorite glass? Like, what's the glass, like at home, or let's say like dream glass? Like, what do you drink out of at home?
I do. Yeah, I do have a favorite glass, and it's a Belgian tulip style. I was pretty actually lucky, or grateful maybe is a better word, last year at CBC. I got a duplicate that's the exact same shape from one of the parties that we went to. But the original one that I had been drinking out of was from a now defunct bar in Antwerp. And it's a thin glass, but it's a really nice tulip shape. And I find it works well for just about every style of beer that I put into it. And I was always a little bit hesitant to use it after the bar closed down because I knew it became irreplaceable. So I was grateful to get one from Surly at the Hopsteiner party last year that was a really nice replacement for that glass.
Stemmed?
Yes, stemmed tulip glass.
Do you you did talk about shape and therefore flavor and aroma perception, but do you have thoughts on I prefer stemmed glassware because I can keep my fingers off the bowl, which leaves the temperature cooler for longer? Do you have thoughts on that?
I think that's the best argument for stem going, Don. Yeah, I think
I just completely made that up.
No, you're right, Don.
It's a really good argument because not just can you keep the beer cooler, but you can affect the temperature however you want to, right? If the beer is too cold and you want to warm it up, then you hold the glass by the bowl. And if you're hoping, once that beer gets the appropriate temperature and you don't want to warm it up anymore, then you switch your grip and you hold it by the stem and you sort of stay in that sweet spot a little bit longer than you might if it was a stemless version of a tulip glass.
Great.
Well, go ahead, Don.
I was just going to ask, okay, so you have your favorite glass.
Yeah.
Do you have any tips on, so for yourself at home, and then also what a customer should be looking for at their favorite tap room in terms of how do you put your glasses in the dishwasher? Do you rinse them out before you put beer in them? Like, how do you ensure you have clean glassware? And then similarly, do you have tips for customers going into a tap room for the first time? What should they be looking for in terms of clean glassware?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I will say this is an area that I think the Cicerone program really excels, and the Brewers Association really excels as well. There's some great free resources out there for people. It's a little bit more of a deep dive, but the Brewers Association's draft beer quality manual has some excellent information on best practices for cleaning glasses and also spotting dirty glasses.
It's a real beach read.
It,
So I highly recommend. I have brought that book to the beach. Highly recommend it. It's a great book, actually. I've read it multiple times. Oh, it's nerdy, but it's for glassware, it's wonderful.
And you were drinking beer out of a can at the beach when you were reading it.
Geez. Of course you had to bring that up.
Go
ahead, Max. I just want to say it's a real beach read.
Yeah, maybe not a beach read, but I think it's pretty darn accessible for the sort of information it's getting into, especially the sections on the glassware and clean glassware. You don't have to be managing a draft system at a restaurant to appreciate that section. But so on a personal basis, I do hand wash all my glasses, but that's more a reflection of the fact that even though my wife and I have a dishwasher, it almost never gets run. We're both sort of just hand wash the dishes on a daily basis sort of people and don't let the dishwasher pile up. Even if I did run the dishwasher, though, I prefer hand washing the beer glasses. I think once you sort of get the routine down, and if you're not afraid to get in there and scrub and make sure there's no residue left, it doesn't take much work to properly clean a beer glass, and you can get really good results. I do like to rinse with water before I use it, but I'm not going to lie to you and say that I'm an absolute stickler for that. Sometimes I'll just grab a glass out of the cabinet, grab a beer out of the fridge, and pour it. I do think that I almost never drink a beer out of the glass or out of the bottle if I'm at home. It almost always goes into a glass. So that's something that I am pretty particular about.
Max, why would you rinse a glass before you use it?
Just in case there's any little bits of dust that have sort of settled into the glass. It's also really good for wetting the surface of the inside of the glass. Not to get too technical or geeky, but you reduce the surface friction of the glass when you're going to pour the beer into it, so you're going to get a more appropriate pour with less foam breakout than you would otherwise necessarily want to get.
Surfactant, right?
Exactly.
Yes.
That's an even better
Yeah,
word.
I was gonna say, Max, you're among nerds here. This is so I think you can get as nerdy as you like.
All right, fair enough.
Yeah.
In terms of washing your glass, do you put dish soap in it, and then do you use a sponge or a towel or Brillo pad or steel wool or what?
I use Dawn dish soap and a sponge, and I know that there are people that would say even that is too much, but I've always had really good results with that at home.
Okay.
I think if you try and get to a point where you're using bartender's friend and going through some really exacting regimen for your home glassware cleaning, then it just gets to be so much work that you don't want to do it anymore. And we're talking about drinking beer, right? This is supposed to be fun.
Yes, I agree with that.
But this is super. Oh wait, I also have I want to go back to a question. What was the best glass you've ever drank out of? Because I know that I'm sure Don and I have an answer to this. But like, what was like a glass you were like, I would like to steal this, but I will not do that. Obviously, because we're not going to steal from establishment. That would be rude, of course.
I don't know if I have a great answer for that in the world of beer.
No, but if it's a different alcohol or wherever, then yeah, that's applicable.
So that's what I was going to say is I was at a wine bar one time and got served a glass of wine it's called a Zalto universal glass. And I did a little bit of Googling after I figured out what the glass was, and they're like $60 a stem. So it's basically irresponsible for someone to have these at home unless you're truly wealthy. But the glass was so thin, the stem was so thin, the whole bowl and the lip were so thin that it was almost distracting from the quality of the wine. And it really took me a little bit of an adjustment period to even get used to like picking up and putting down the glass without being afraid I was going to break it. But you could immediately tell that you were drinking out of an incredibly high quality piece of glassware. And so, of course, this was a wine bar that paid a lot of attention to their wine.
Is there a beer equivalent of that glass, do you think?
I think the same company makes some glassware that is beer specific, but I haven't dug too deep because I really don't want to even get in the back of my head that I should buy something like that.
That's true.
It's one of those things you pretend like. I don't like even the idea of flying first class because I don't want to get used to it, and I don't want to get used to drinking out of $75 beer glasses either. I'm perfectly happy with my free Belgian tulip glass.
Hey, if it works, it works. I mean, that's my favorite glass too. That Belgian, like I have a 12-ounce Belgian tulip glass that's what I gravitate towards a lot. That's what most of my glassware, not to talk about pints and panels, but when pints and panels is glassware, it's usually 13-ounce Belgian tulips because that's just a great glass for everything, you know.
Yeah.
And it's beer. It's a beer specific glass. There's something about it that says, "Here is beer, drink me." And I love that aspect of that glass. I think it's a great one.
And I will just clarify, I know exactly which shape glass you're talking about. The tulip that's my favorite is a little bit taller and a little bit skinnier than that glass.
Yes, I know. Actually, I was just about to say I'm talking about a different side. You have like yours almost has like a little hat on it because I have that surly glass as well.
Yeah.
And that's a really, really nice one for like because that'll hold a full pint.
Correct.
That's a really, really nice glass. That also just feels there's something about the stem that feels special. Do you have any thoughts about like the new glasses, like a Teku or the IPA glass, the stout glass, those Rustal fancy glasses, like anything like that? Do you think those are good examples of things that good beer glasses, essentially, is what I'm asking?
I like the Teku glass a lot. I have a couple of them in my cabinet. I think if I wasn't going to reach for my favorite glass, that'd probably be my second glass that I would reach for, especially if I wanted something with a stem.
Why would that be?
I just like the shape of it. I think it's comfortable in the hand, and I think, oftentimes I'll split a bottle with someone or with several friends, so I don't need that full 12-ounce or 16-ounce capacity. And I think a 4 or 5-ounce pour in a Teku looks like the right amount. I also like some of the really traditional glasses too. A footed Pilsner glass and a dimpled mug are sort of some of my go-tos as well, depending on the beer that I'm drinking. And I didn't want to gloss over it too much, but I think that's another thing where coming to a restaurant or a bar that pays attention to their glassware starts to become part of the experience, right? Historical significance for glassware is a real thing. And that's one of the reasons why Cicerone sort of pays attention to that. And asks, what's the traditional glass for a Bock? What's the traditional glass for an Irish stout? And knowing those things becomes important because it's one more way to show people that you understand what you're talking about and you care about what's going on and how you're presenting that to the customer or to your guests in a more sophisticated way.
Right.
It's
like a lingo.
It's so good when you go to a brewery and they have all the glasses, because then you're like, oh, they know, they get it.
Oh, and then you could order your beer by the glass. I want whatever beer comes in that glass.
Yep. Yeah. That's a lot. I mean, I work part-time at Fox Farm, and a lot of people see that it's the Czech mug that does it. They see the big Czech mug and they're like, what comes that? I want that. And I'm like, well, you can only get the Czech Pilsner. And they're like, sure, fine, whatever. I want that mug. Because there's something so sturdy and utilitarian and like full about that mug that says like, here is beer in its simplest form, drink me.
Absolutely.
That's a really, really nice thing about beer is that the glass should say, drink me. Like, here I am, enjoy me. Like, this is me in my best form. This is how the brewer intended it. This is how the culture intended it, especially when we're talking about like Germans, Czechs, Belgians. I mean, every country and culture has different beer glasses, and it's always so fascinating to see how things are poured and how things are drank, because it's really, really fascinating how the difference is. It's great. I love it.
And typically, if you deep dive into, why those glasses are the way they are, there's usually some good historic reason for it too. So it's a good way to connect beer to other aspects of culture, I think.
Yeah.
Sure.
And at the end of the day, I think some of it just comes down to good marketing too, right? Some of those glasses don't have a real historic relevance, but they're well designed and they look nice on the bar. And some marketing team said that's going to sell some extra beer, and I'm sure they were right. The example that always comes to mind for me with that is Stella Artois. with their really fancy chalice that we see in the US. But if you go to Belgium, I've never seen Stella in that sort of chalice glass. The first time I saw Stella poured on a bar in Belgium, it came out in basically what looks like a lambic glass, right? Tall, straight edges with a bit of a taper to it, and not a remarkably fancy glass at all. And
like a fancy shaker, basically.
Yeah, like a shaker, maybe with a little bit of cut glass on it.
Yeah. My follow-up question is, why did you order a Stella in Belgium?
Don't worry, Don. I'm not going to disappoint you. I didn't order it. The guy next to me at the bar did.
Oh, okay.
It was like when we went and when you and I went to the rustic pub after Trefontaine.
Oh, did we drink Stella there? We might have drank.
No,
Stella.
we didn't. But we had, was it Alken Mace? I'm probably pronouncing that wrong. I apologize to all my Belgian friends. But it comes in it comes in the same glass, that lambic tumbler, essentially. It doesn't come in any kind of fancy glass. And that's like I almost think it's like the Belgian shaker, essentially.
Right. And sometimes a simple glass is best for a simple beer, and there's nothing wrong with that.
Right.
Yeah. And then sometimes you get, a Orval glass with the like cut, food, like foot and the beautiful, painted screen printing, and it has the gold top, and you're just like, hell yeah, like everything's going to be okay. Or any of the German steins are really like, they have made beautiful stoneware and now glassware for centuries. And it really shows how much the German, how much they care about the product, and like what they're drinking. And there's nothing more beautiful than I had a half liter of Hofbrau at the airport in Munich, and it was the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. I think I've talked about that beer multiple times on multiple episodes of this podcast, because it blew my mind how beautiful. And I was like all hungover and out of it from a flight, and it was just great. And it made the glass and the beer made it colorable, and that's the best part about everything. I'm just so upbeat about glassware. I love it, even if I'm the one that's like drinking out of coffee mugs. I think it's still a really great expression. It's a really great way to heighten the experience of beer.
And I know from experience that you have a favorite beer glass in Belgium as well, right?
Oh yes, the Cine Blonde glass. I love that glass.
Yeah. Yeah.
The Cine Blonde, which actually is a fine beer. It's a snifter, and with a silver top, and it has a beautiful blue and white logo where the eye is a steeple. And I make everyone, anytime we go to Belgium, go to allaboutbeermag and have that surly waitstaff, and I make everyone order a Cine Blonde so they can enjoy that glass. I made Max do it. I made everybody do it.
Don, what about you, Don? Favorite glass?
Don,
I do. Well, I do, and it's kind of long and complicated. But I'm more different glasses for different beers, I'd say. Like I like my imperial stouts and snifters. I like my IPAs in something taller. I like my pilsners in something very tall. But after what Max told us at the very beginning, I'm drinking everything out of my quack glass now from now on.
the most impractical glass of all time.
Yeah, your imperial stouts with your like wood handle. Well, actually, you're not supposed to drink out of the handle. You're supposed to take it out of the handle. Isn't that correct?
Which I do. Yeah.
Okay, good. All right, just making sure. That sounds like something you would do, Don.
Yeah, absolutely. I do have one quick follow-up question about cleaning. I've heard of some people sprinkling a little salt in the glass either before or after they rinse it, but before they put beer in it. What's the deal with that? And do you recommend, or do you think that's ridiculous?
That's a great question. And I sort of got sidetracked there, I think, when I was talking about glass cleaning and sort of how I do it, and never got to really answering how to spot a dirty glass or spot a clean glass. The salt test, as it's affectionately called, is a good way to do that, right? You have a glass, you wet the inside of the glass, there's no beer in the glass, so that's one of the keys to this test. And you just sprinkle a little bit of salt inside the glass. And in a clean glass, it should stick to the sides of the glass uniformly. And in a dirty glass, you'll get clumping, and there will be spots on the glass that don't have salt and other spots that have a big old wad of salt on the side of the glass. And so if it's not uniformly adhering to that wet glass, that's a sign that there's some film there. I'll be honest with you, it's not a test that I do at home. I am at the point now where I trust my glass washing process. Every once in a while, I pour a beer in a glass and say, oh, that wasn't perfect. But again, we're drinking beer, especially in a home setting. This is supposed to be fun, and it's not supposed to be something that stresses you out. So ending up with a glass full of beer, even if there's a little bit of bubbles on the side of the glass, which is a sign of a nucleation site, and that's a sign of a glass that's not clean, right? That's probably the easiest way when you're at a bar to spot a beer handed to you in a not clean glass. There's bubbles all up and down the side of the glass. But at home, that's not the end of the world. Just don't put a picture of that beer on Instagram or Facebook so that your beer friends can tear you to shreds. Right, the dirty glass mafia shows up and starts yelling about your dirty glassware. If I was running a restaurant and I was really trying to dial in my glass washing regimen, I think the salt test is a good way to do that without wasting a lot of beer. But for your average home beer consumer, probably above and beyond what's actually necessary.
Thank you.
For sure.
Anything else, John?
No, I'm excited to put a imperial stout in the fridge so that I can have it from my quack glass later.
Yeah, and I'm going to break out my 1970s Garfield mugs, which are my favorite glassware. Actually, the McDonald's 1980 LA Olympics glass is my go-to now, which is it's an 8-ounce glass mug, and it's a great glass for sharing a 16-ounce, because it does 7 ounces or 8 ounces really well. So that's my go-to. And tulip glasses. So I just like the presentation of glassware. I think it looks beautiful when done well. There's nothing worse than a dirty glass. It stresses me out. But at home,
I can hear the stress in your voice even as you said that.
At home, it's fine.
So, Em, I have a question for you, and I think I know the answer to this based off of your personality. But if you get a dirty glass at a bar, what do you do about it?
I just bang out the glass. You can bang out those bubbles. If it's filthy, I will say something. I will say during COVID, I ate outside, and it was my first draft beer in a really long time. And it was a Guinness, and they served me the filthiest looking Guinness glass. And I said, I do not care. I am so happy to have a draft Guinness. I haven't had one in over a year. And I drank the whole thing and didn't say anything. But normally normally you just kind of hit it on the table, and you can bang out the bubbles and hope for the best. So, but if it's really filthy, I'm not drinking it.
Yeah, I feel the same way. I sort of draw the line at if there's lipstick around the rim of the glass, or if there's visible grime on the lip of the glass, I will ask for a new one. But bubbles on the inside, I'm not the type of person to complain to a bar about that.
Yeah, again, you hit it on the bar and they go away. Especially if it's a little. If it's a lot and it's sometimes the bubbles are small and slimy, then yeah, you're gonna hear from me. But most of the time, if it's just some bubbles, you're at the dive bar and whatever, it's fine. Just
I feel like that when you're at the dive bar, it's not the best time to be a beer geek and be super geeky about things like this.
Probably. Just drink your beer.
Why aren't you pouring my Budweiser through a side pull tap?
I want Budweiser out of a side pull. That sounds awesome.
Yeah, that's not a bad idea, Don.
Oh my God, Don, let's start a bar.
Trademark. Sorry.
Okay. God damn it. That's true, but Don is a lawyer, so.
I was starting to think that the dive bars up in Canada were better than the ones we have down here.
Yeah, we don't do there's no side pull at my dive bar. But yeah, all right, wonderful. Don, any other questions?
No, I'm happy. Yep.
Max, this has been very enlightening, and I'm really appreciative to have you come on the All About Beer podcast to talk glassware, because you're one of the smartest beer people I know, and so we're very glad that you came on to talk about glassware. And if people want to follow you on the socials or anything else, where can they find info about you?
Well, the listeners can't see it, but you're making me blush over here, so thank you. Pleasure to be on the show today. I really appreciate the invite. Happy to come back anytime. On Instagram, I am at Max Finnance, all one word, nothing fancy. And that's about the only social I pay attention to these days. I got off the beer Twitter when things started getting crazy over there.
Sounds about right. So, all right, cool. Well, thank you very much. We really appreciate all your expertise. And yeah, thanks for coming on the show.
Thanks
Thank
a lot.
you, Max.
You guys have a great day. Cheers.
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 Estrella Galicia is an independent family-owned brewery in northwest Spain, founded in 1906. Estrella Galicia Cerveza Especial is a world-class lager brewed using the finest Spanish malts, locally cultivated Galician hops, and the best brewing practices made out of the state-of-the-art facility in A Coruna. Recognized around the world for quality and exceptional character, Estrella Galicia is a beer like no other. To learn more about Estrella Galicia, follow them at Estrella Galicia USA on Instagram.
All About Beer is back, and we're asking for your support to help provide the independent beer media this rich and colorful industry deserves. Visit our website, allaboutbeer.com, where we're frequently posting new content. And please consider throwing us a few bucks at patreon.com/allaboutbeer. We have low-cost memberships for individuals and small and large companies alike. Every dollar goes to help produce new articles and podcasts.
Attention all managers and team leaders. Are you looking to provide your staff with the best training in the beer industry? Look no further than the Beer Savvy Online by the Cicerone Certification Program. With their online training, your team can master the fundamentals of excellent beer service, beer styles, and flavor in just a few hours. Plus, you can monitor their learning progress as a manager. And here's some exciting news. Saturday, April 22nd, is Beer Clean Glass Day, a day that celebrates the importance of clean glassware in beer service. What better way to mark this occasion by ensuring your team is well trained in all aspects of beer service, including maintaining clean glassware? By completing the Beer Savvy course, your team can earn a globally recognized beer industry credential and set your business apart as a leader in the industry. To learn more about Beer Savvy Online and group training options, visit cicerone.org and click on the group training button. Give your staff the tools they need to succeed in the beer industry today.
Matthew Cummings is the founder and captain of Pretentious Craft Co. 1 part brewery, 1 part glassblowing studio. He is a classically trained painter with an MFA in glass sculpture. He launched Pretentious Glass in December of 2012 on Etsy as a side hustle to support his sculptural work. In an unexpected twist, the glassware company went viral on Foodbeast and Huffington Post. The side hustle turned into an 80-hour work week to keep up with demand, and it never slowed down. Fast forward a few years, Matthew has his own glassblowing studio in downtown Knoxville, Tennessee, and opened up Pretentious Beer Company next door, a microbrewery focused on the craft of craft beer. It is the only place in the world where you can drink beer made in-house out of glassware made in-house and watch everything being produced. Welcome to the show, Matthew.
Hi, thanks. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, thanks for being here. So I want to ask about Pretentious Glassware and your brewery, because I don't think I've ever heard of such a thing. Do other glassblowing studios have breweries?
Yeah, that's a pretty niche.
There's 7,000 of us.
No, I mean,
yeah, I mean, as far as I know, we're the only place in the world where we make our own beer and make our own glassware.
that's so cool. I guess my question is more glassblowing side, how hard is it to make a glass? I've watched glassblowers work before at glassblowing studios. Do you go in with all right, we're gonna blow glass for a hazy IPA today, or are you is it like a feeling? Are you working with what will become a glass, and you're like, oh, I love this design, let's try, or is it like jazz where you're improvising, or
Yeah.
how does everything work? Because I don't know anything about glassblowing. It's fascinating to me.
Right. Okay. Well, so it's it depends on if we're making more of our flagship production pieces,
Mhm.
and we'll tend to do those for at least 3 hours at a time if we're doing a design, just because since it is so in-depthly handmade, it takes a minute to get synced up with the glass. Even if you've made hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of that glass, it still takes you a minute every day. But we try to do it in bigger groups of time.
Mhm.
But if I'm designing new glassware, I've got a set of wine glasses that we're about to launch in a
cool.
month or so. And so those is definitely more improv. Like I'll go in
Okay.
with a few ideas, see what the glass wants to do because it has so much personality. The material itself does. And it's when you get the best results are when you kind of let yourself go and you listen to what the glass wants to do because it knows the best way to get a good result. Like it, however it moves the most organically is what's going to be the most beautiful thing. And that's really similar to like making really good lagers, right? If we want to take that to the beer side, like making a great lager is about not getting in the way of the process and making it as smooth and organic as possible.
That's a really good point.
That is awesome.
I'm assuming you make good lagers on the beer side.
I love to make lagers. I hope that they're good lagers, but we like, big lager fan.
Nice. I think you're talking to some lager heads as well. So so your glassware has some really unique shapes. You know, I was looking at your website and there's like a tipsy one, there's some really tall ones. Do you come up with, is that like the design for the tipsy, the one that kind of leans, and then some other ones, like how does that come about? Like, are you like, I want to make a glass that leans, or I want to, you know, make this, I love this beer, so I want to make a lager glass with a beautiful handle for a mug, let's say. Like, what's your inspiration?
I mean, I've been doing this for like 10 years now, over 10 years. So there are so many different ways that I find inspiration, and that's one of the beautiful things about being an artist. It's your development is learning how to see, not learning to be a great artist. It's learning how to see and see inspiration, everything around you. So like the mug, our foamy boy, that's like, so we got Lucre taps in last year. And we're just, you know, in love, enamored with how the Lucre taps affect the beer and the protein structure in the head. And so it's like, let's do a mug specifically to celebrate this faucet. And so I designed a few different mugs. One that was pretty like crazy, one that was, one was very traditional. And then let our fans kind of vote which one they like. So they chose the traditional one of the, shorter mug with the handle. But even then, I always try to find a way to combine functionality and experience. How do I improve the function and also the experience of drinking? Because I don't really make glasses to just grab and chug a beer, I make glasses that hopefully you slow down, you appreciate the beverage. You're a little more mindful of your experience with the beer. So like with that foamy boy, we've got this like kind of vintage diamond texture, and the handle is in glass, we call it a Roman handle. It's got these 3 divides on it, and it's all very ergonomic, but it's also beautiful with refractions of light. Very much like a diamond, it throws light around inside. So if you've got a gorgeous, clear, straw colored Czech lager in there, it's like a freaking disco light show, So doing things like that is really fun.
It's a beautiful glass. I think I definitely gravitated towards it on the website. A lot of your things are really, really beautiful. And so if I go to your brewery, do you serve the glassware out of that? Like if I order, I want to know how you deal with stealing.
Yeah.
So we have a real cute little sign above the door as you're leaving that says in cursive writing, so it's cuter. Please don't steal our fucking glasses.
Yeah.
So that everyone gets to see that. I mean, it still happens, which sucks because someone literally like through their own body made each one of those glasses. Like we flat for each one of those glasses. So that kind of sucks. But we've got, generally like we've got a great clientele in downtown Knoxville. and we got a really respectful group of people. And most of the times, craft beer people are very respectful and pretty cool.
Yeah.
Oh, sure. Yeah, of course. Yeah. Because I saw the way some of your glassware is, you know, it's handmade. So the price
Yeah.
point matches that. So I was like, wow, you guys use your own glass. That's bold.
It is. But it's cool to test it out though, because
Sure.
I can say that, you know, these glasses are stronger than regular glass and they're tested in a commercial environment, you know, day in and day out. So that's kind of cool, because that is one of the things, like we melt our base glass from scratch every week. So we have all mass produced glass it utilizes cheap oxides, and it's been melted out and it loses a lot of the structure. And we get some really beautiful glass. The raw materials are mixed by some friends out of Spruce Pine, North Carolina, that we mix that up, and it's really clear glass and it's super duper strong. So that's kind of cool.
That is
And
cool.
you
That was one of our
practice what you
questions.
preach.
Yeah. We were gonna say
Yeah.
what's the difference between the hand blown? And that's really cool that you kind of have a good system going where you utilize friends. And you know, how many people are making glass at the facility? Like, how many glass blowers do you employ?
We've got 6 glass blowers here.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we're going every day.
And I can buy your glass like on the website, or do you sell them? I'm assuming you sell them at the brewery. Do you go to other
Yeah.
where can I find your products? If has other brewery reached out to you about doing proprietary glassware or special glassware? Like how do you fit into the craft beer scene as a glass blower when most people are
Yeah.
just buying like 13-ounce Belgian tulip glasses and putting them in?
Yeah. That's a great question. I want to talk about the glassware used at breweries after this, but yeah, there's a good deal of breweries that have our glasses. Most common is doing like mug clubs or anniversary releases, things like that. Those happen quite a bit, and that's really fun. And like we just did, it wasn't beer glass related, but we just did some decanters for 18th Street Brewing and Distillery.
Cool.
That turned out super duper nice. One of my favorite projects that we did was with Embrace the Funk in, like, I want to say 2017, 2018, something like that. It was when the Eclipse came over Tennessee, and
Oh yeah.
Knoxville and Nashville were right on the line
Mm-hmm.
of the total eclipse. And so Brandon did a golden sour at Embrace the Funk for the eclipse, and had us do a glass where to release with the bottle. And so I designed this, like, it was like all black, opaque black glass, and then did this crazy like Swedish scrawl technique that I'm never going to do again. It's such a pain in the ass. It looked awesome, but it was so hard. And so we etched away an eclipse sun, and then had their logo on the other side. So whenever you poured your beer into it, it was all blacked out, and then you had this beautiful like golden halo of beer became the eclipse.
Whoa.
Looked freaking
I gotta
awesome.
look that up.
Yeah.
It was so cool. Yeah, I think I've got like one that I kept from that, but when they released that, it broke their website in like 2 minutes. They sold out of them, and it was the most difficult commission. And then they were like, "Hey, we've already sold them all. We've got a lot of people on a wait list. Can you make 80 more?" And I was like, "Okay, if I have to."
If you have to.
It was like, "That's wait. Thanks for adding stress onto this." You know.
You mentioned how, for the fizzy glass, for example, you designed the glass to showcase your glass was influenced by the beer you were pouring, and specifically the Lucre tap. Does it ever go the other way where, like, you have an idea for a glass, you want to make this beautiful glass, and then it actually influences the beer you make for it?
That's a tough one.
I'm always fascinated because I consider brewing and beer an art form in and of itself. And I'm always
Agreed.
amazed when,
Mhm.
musicians take their musical training to their brewing or,
Mhm.
or whatever. So and you've mentioned a few things, and I was just wondering how integrated your two arts are. But
Yeah. I'm trying to think if I've ever designed a beer inspired by one of my glasses. I know recently or last year, I was brewing and I had a deadline for an art show at the gallery at Pretentious Glass. And it was like we were having a first Friday open, and I was supposed to make 3 pieces or however many, and I hadn't done it. And so I was like, all right, I'm gonna get both of these. And I was brewing all day. So I'm like, I'm just gonna do them both at once. So I got all of after we had mashed out, I got a bucket full of grain, wet spent grain, and then sculpted a like hollow bowl out of the bottom of the bucket of spent grain, and then went in with some flame reactive glass color on the outside of some molten glass, and blew into it and used the spent grain as a mold to make this planter. And because the grain was wet, it created a steam layer, so I didn't pick up a ton of grain. But the grain that I did, because of how part of it was melting and burning, it reacted to the glass color that was flame reactive, and it gave it this crazy, real organic kind of mirrored, like antiqued madness. That was a lot of fun doing both brewing and blowing glass in the same day.
How
that is
inspirational!
awesome.
How inspirational! And how thoughtful of you to be like, well, you do fuse the two together quite well, and it's really really cool to see. I'm a big So at your brewery, are you brewing all styles, or are you guys focusing on lagers? Are you doing hazies? What's the vibe like over in the brewing side?
So being a sculptor and a crafts person, as my background, I try to approach that same way on the brew side. So we really focus on the craft of craft beer. We pretty much make as many different styles, whatever we're inspired by. We'll dive really deep into the history and the approach of that beer and why that beer came about, and then just explore it. We don't really do flagships. We make a bunch of, lagers, IPAs, sours, stouts, Belgian beers, anything you can think of that we get inspired by, we'll just run with it.
That's cool. So it's similar to glassware, where you're like, I'm gonna let my the glass do its thing. Whenever you're inspired by, you're like, let's do this week. You kind of keep it loose. And it's
cool. Or we keep it inspired. Like we've got like 4 lagers on tap right now. So about a year ago, we always had Czech Pilsners on tap, a Czech Pilsner since we started like 5 years ago. And I was like, I want to expand our lager program. So I wanted to hit, a Pils, Czech Pils, German Pils, an Italian Pilsner, a Helles. And then we also have our Marzen that we've actually been making year round.
Oh, nice. I love a year-round Marzen.
And our Bach. And so I was like, all right, we're doing lagers. Let's dive deep into base malts, our Pilsner malt, and what expressions can we get from, using floor malted Czech malt versus German Pilsner versus American Canadian Pilsner. What are we going to use when? And it's not just one Pilsner malt that we have in house, but being more responsive to the base style.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it seems like you take a really artistic approach to both, which as an artist myself, I'm something of an artist myself, as I would say. I find very inspiring, so I really appreciate that both sides of that. Don, do you have any other questions?
I actually had a lot of questions I wanted to
Yeah.
ask, and then Matthew just on his own answered
You
them
did,
without my
yeah.
asking. Yeah, it
We
was
had a
I'm
li-
awesome.
I go on tangents. I'm sorry.
No,
No,
no
no,
tangents.
no,
That was
no. This is
spot on what I wanted to hear. It was
yeah. So
awesome.
we were yeah. Matthew, how can people find the glassware? Find your brewery? What's the socials website for?
Yeah, Pretentious Glass is all of our socials. Pretentiousglassco.com is our website, and also same thing, pretentiousbeerco.com. And they'll take you to either one. But we do that. We've got a big shop on Etsy that we keep up to date with everything. And yeah.
Cool. Awesome. Well, thank you for your time today. Your glassware is beautiful. So thank you for bringing some artistic, I just the artistic the artistry that you have is really inspiring. So thank you for that. And thank you for your time today.
Oh, thank you guys. This is a lot of
Yeah.
fun.
Cool.
Cheers, Matthew.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Charles Finkel is a designer, entrepreneur, artist, and founder of Bonvin, Merchant du Vin, and the Pike Brewing Company in Seattle, Washington. Charles began marketing wines from small family-owned California wineries in the 1970s and was the first to market the wines of Washington State throughout the country. Charles and Roseanne founded Pike Place Brewery, now known as Pike Brewing Company, in 1989. Welcome to the show, Charles.
Thank you, Em. It's a pleasure to be here.
So we've been told by a certain person that you have an enormous collection of glassware. Is this true?
I have actually an enormous collection of beer drinking
drinkware.
vessels.
Yes.
Some of which is glass, but actually most of the tankards and mugs and steins are not glass. They're ceramic, they're porcelain, pewter, silver, wood, leather, other materials than glass.
How did this collection get started? I know that you have I've been to Pike, and I know the breweryana surrounding going to Pike. It's beautiful. But how did this drinkware collection start?
Well, it started long before Pike. I'm, as John may tell you, I'm an inveterate collector of all manner of things, and the smaller they are, the more likely I am to collect them. So I'm not inclined to collect cars or motorcycles or anything like that, although I do have several bicycles. But beer drinking vessels are beautiful, for one thing. I'm very interested in the aesthetics of them. They're functional in that I love beer, and the nicer the vessel, the more wonderful the experience in a lot of cases. And they're evocative of the travels that I've done, and I presume you all have done as well. You just said you've been to Seattle to Pike. And I can't help but think of my friends in Bavaria when I handled one of those beautiful stoneware steins, and particularly from Eyinger Brewery. I've been to many a festival with Franz Inselkammer, the Bräu von Eying, and pleasurably consumed lots of great beer from those steins, but also from delicate etched glassware or beautiful lidded tankards. So as long as I can remember, I mean, I went to Europe for the first time in 1964, and I began my collection not only of beer vessels, well, I'll call them beer glasses for lack of just to make it a little simpler, beer glasses. And in fact, one of my favorite possessions is not a beer tankard, but rather a 16th century etching of a beautiful tankard from Germany. I got in Munich. I traded Kennedy $50 for that, and it's continued to be. In fact, I'm looking at it as I run now. It's just beautiful. And when I photographed it, I actually photographed it for the book The Connoisseur's Guide to the World's Best Beers,
Hmm.
and juxtaposed with some bottles of beer, and you couldn't really tell that it was an etching, but rather that looked like a real tankard behind. So I've been collecting things all my life, and I particularly have always enjoyed collecting things having to do with beer. And as you can tell by visiting Pike, it's not
Oh
just
yeah.
beer drinking vessels, but also ephemera, labels, posters, coasters, and I'm still looking for beer toasters, but I haven't found any of those yet.
How many vessels do you think you possess? Like what? How
Oh,
many?
I don't know the answer to that. I've never counted them, but I think in the range of 1,000 or
Oh
Oh,
wow.
maybe more than that.
And are these displayed? I know that some, I mean, are
Yeah,
some
they're
of them at
displayed.
Pike, or are they in your home? How is it? How are they? How do you
I
display
have
your
them.
glassware?
I'm a non-discriminatory exhibitor. I have them at home,
Mhm.
and I have a collection of really nice wooden tankards at home, and also a beautiful leather tankard, and lots of early stoneware, and some ceramics of various kinds, and some etched glass. And at Pike, and those are displayed just around my office primarily. I try
Mhm.
not to be beer consumptive in every part of the house, beer centric, I should say. But at Pike, we purposely built huge display cabinets, steel display cabinets that are impregnable and inaccessible other than to look at.
Mhm.
In fact, so much so that when they were screwed in, I'm unable to get them apart. So it's like a you know, a bank vault. It's not only can other people not get them, neither can I. And those are devoted to primarily tankards rather than glasses. Some are glass, and then I have them hanging all over the place, also secured with thick clamped wires. And those are all around the bar, all around the museum, upstairs, downstairs, pretty much everywhere you look. But the nicest ones are on display.
Yeah, it's if anyone needs to go to, you should go to Pike just because it is. I was there 2018, and it was a really nice place to have a pint and see all. Like it was like I've never felt like I've been drinking in a museum before until
Yeah.
I went to Pike.
and the beer is good too.
And
my
yeah.
favorite of those, by the way, is a stoneware mug with a hand painted portrait of a monk or a priest giving absolution to one of his parishioners, a woman, by fondling her breast. But
And
there
that's
are
on
other good
that's on
other good
display.
ones as well.
Oh boy.
So they come in every shape and size,
Oh
including
sure.
one series that's all the family portraits on the steins. So you have
Oh.
Aunt Mary and Uncle Fritz and the whole gang right there on their mugs, so they know not
Which
to
one?
pick up the inappropriate one.
What is the earliest like vessel that you currently own? Like how
Well, I'm
old?
sitting here looking at a couple of vessels that are, I think, 18th century. One says beer, Bierre,
Mhm.
and it's stoneware with kind of a irregular sunburst pattern and just the words beer stenciled on there. It's blue and white. It's gorgeous. And I have another one that is similar with a lid. The one that says beer probably had a lid at one time, but the other one just says liter, Litre, and it's beer glass. Those I love, and those are quite old. And I also have a collection of very old stoneware mugs. Not on the material is the same as you see in a modern, like I mentioned the Eiger mugs earlier, but a modern Bavarian beer mug or stein. But these are handmade that you can actually see the clay, the way that they applied the clay, and some are circular and some are vertical, and but all of them are irregular and, in my view, very handsome.
Hmm.
So those date from the 18th century as well. And I have a lot of 19th century, and most everything I have is older, at least before the Second World War, and but most of it before the turn of the previous century.
Hmm.
So
Wow.
not only with the glassware, but also with pretty much everything, the signs and the labels and all of the bottles that we have at Pike.
Where do you find them? Do you spend a lot of your travel time combing antique
Well,
shops, or?
I'm of an age that I was hunting for ephemera. I'll use that term way before there was an internet. So one of the things that I did, I was mentioned, I went to Europe for the first time in 1964. One of the first things I did wherever I went was go seek out antique shops and look around, not specifically for beer mugs, but for anything having to do with drinks, wine, beer, spirits, advertising material. And not all of these are advertising material. As I said, some are just personal articles that people had made for them. But I love the ones that have advertising on them. The very old ones normally don't have advertising on them, but I do have some that are old that have that. And then when the internet exploded, so did my ability to procure varied items, beer trays. I didn't mention that. I have thousands of beer trays, and when eBay first started, I could look on there antique beer trays or antique beer steins, mugs, vessels, glasses. Each of those is a different category that someone may or may not have listed there, the item that they inherited from grandpa. And so I was able to procure them that way. So a little bit of both, but as I travel these days, I'm less inclined to go to antique shops. First, because I've filled up my space, so I don't have much room for anything. And a second, because I'm not the only person that's discovered collecting all this stuff, and nor was I the first. People have been collecting beer related items as long as there's been beer, which is thousands of years. And coincidentally, the glass came from the same place that beer came from, Mesopotamia and Egypt. So that was the first use of glass. It was very expensive and, of course, hand blown. And it wasn't until the 18th to the Industrial Revolution in the 17th, 18th century that mass market glass became available and cheap. And that's where most of the modern beer drinking vessels came from, mass ability to make them in a factory rather than by hand.
Right.
How do you view the current state of glassware through like your breweryana background? Like, do you like the current state of glassware? There's a lot of choice, or is it
it seems to be
flashy, or how do you feel about it?
The pint glass seems to be the glass of choice for craft brewers. We also have the is it Turku?
Yeah, the Teku, Teku, yeah.
And I personally like that. It's a little bit delicate, and particularly in regard to serving large volumes of beer, which we do, it's not as practical. It breaks more easily, and it's much more expensive in the beginning. But and a lot of people say, well, the worst glass for the beer itself is that pint, the traditional pint beer glass, just a sloped pint glass. But I've had many a nice beers from that glass, and I use them at home too for the same reason. They're less delicate and not inclined to break. I have at home wooden mugs from Pinkus Muller. I actually keep nuts in those. They have lids on them, wooden lids. They're great. And I have Tiku and pints and elegant etched glasses from Bohemia, 19th century, and lots of different ones. And I use those when I'm entertaining, the beautiful etched glasses. But just for everyday glasses, normally I'll either use a Tiku or the pint glass.
Besides
So
the,
I mean,
yeah.
there's been a lot of discussion among craft brewers as to what the glass accentuates the aroma of the beer.
Right.
And I agree with that. I've tasted beer from a lot of different ones, and that's certainly a motivation for choosing one vessel over the other. But on the other hand, a motivation also is the practicality and convenience, and also the aesthetics. So when you're having an elegant dinner, you don't want to serve it in a. Some people would say when you have an elegant dinner, you might not want to serve beer, but in my case, I think those are two totally compatible things.
Absolutely.
And so I try to serve that in an elegant glass rather than just some people call a pounder.
Right.
Do
Not
you
me.
Yeah. I mean, I like a good shaker pint glass. Those are
Shaker, is that what you call it?
Yeah, I call it a shaker pint. It's good. It's, you throw them in the dishwasher and it's a heavier glass. It feels it's like got more substance to it. But
Yeah,
a lot
exactly.
of people
Well,
don't,
you
a lot
feel
of
like
people don't like them.
feel like you're drinking more beer.
Yeah. So besides the Cheeky Monk tankard, do you have a favorite glassware? Like at home, the one that you stop by all the time and you're like, oh my God, I can't believe I own this. This is amazing.
Oh, well, I have several. I have one that's here in front of me. That's a commemorative glass. This is a mug shape, but it's made of crystal, and it commemorates. Let me put my glasses on just to affirm what it commemorates. The coronation of May 12th, 1937, of Robert the Stewart, 1371, to King George the Sixth, 1936.
Oh wow!
And it has a beautiful crown etched in the glass or in the crystal, and beautiful initials, and flowers, and the text on the front and the back. I love that one. I have several Capodimonte. Capodimonte was the Italian equivalent to Meissen or Nymphenburg or Royal Copenhagen. It was owned by the King of Naples, the state of Naples, and was one of the finest porcelain manufacturers in the world. And I have several of the tankards from them. And one of my favorite is a tankard that's a little bit oxymoronic, and that is a tankard from the first World's Fair that we had here in Seattle, called the Alaska Yukon Pacific Exhibition. And it's made by Roald Dalton in England, but it has this beautiful logo of an indigenous person and a muse and I guess a modern person. And the one that's oxymoronic about it is that was in 1909, and the World's Fair decided they didn't want to allow alcohol on the premises. So even though there was a big beer stein, you couldn't drink there, or presumably you couldn't. But I grew up in Oklahoma, where we had prohibition until I was in high school, and our favorite son, Will Rogers, was famous for having said, "People stumble to the polls to vote dry." So I guess it falls into the what else is new category.
Yeah. Wow. That's awesome.
Yeah. You should make like a video of all your tankards and explain them, because just listening to you talk about, what you have is fascinating.
Yeah, I feel
Yeah,
there's a
thanks.
book there as well. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've got a lot of I've got all manner of things to record,
Hmm.
including my life, and it is my plan to do that in the form of a book or two or three. But at the moment, I continue to work for Pike Brewing Company, and so that consumes a lot of my time, plus doing a little traveling.
Oh, sure. Did you
Last
when?
year I went to Egypt
Oh, cool.
in part to learn about beer,
Hmm.
and there I saw in the Egyptian Museum glass. I'm not sure it was wine or beer from King Tut's tomb. Beautiful gold encrusted glass, and there were other lots of different drinking vessels there as well. That was interesting.
That's really cool. So you still work at Pike. Are you the one that decides what glassware to use, or is that someone else, or do you have a hand in deciding what things
Yeah,
get poured into what?
we're kind of a team effort. We have a team effort to decide on pretty much everything, and
Mhm.
we, with the exception of how do you pronounce it? Tiku, is that it?
Yeah, I say teku, but I think you can say tiku.
Okay, Teku.
Mhm.
Aside from that, we really haven't changed too much. That same pint or a
Mhm.
half size of that is, we call it a schooner.
Right.
Yes.
Well, that
yes.
word schooner, I'm not sure what the origin of that is, but I've tried to figure out what is a schooner, and it's some cases it implies a larger volume of beer, and in our case it implies a half a volume of a half a pint, and so schooners, a lot of glassware has names, and some are kind of cute names, like a nonic. That's the glass that I was most familiar with from Yorkshire,
Mhm.
and it's called a nonic because it has kind of a bulbous top that when you toast someone, you don't click the edge, and as a result you don't nick the glass. And so that's kind of a neat glass too. And I think the English are the only ones that have a nonic, although other places have glasses that have that bulbous top as well. And a chalice, that's a very broad term. I'm also a gardener, so someone says, "Is that a daisy?" Well, that's not the botanical name. That just happens to be a common name that a lot of people call a lot of different flowers. And the same is true of the beer vessels. They have names, and Pokel and tankard and stein and glass and pounder, and all that are not all the same in all the places.
Right.
It makes it confusing to the person that wants to know about them.
It's true, because I always thought schooner to me is a half pour. So when I went to Pike, I had a schooner of your Munich Dunkel. And then I've gone to places like in Australia, a half pour in Victoria is a pot. It's 10-ounce pour. But then you would go to Sydney and you couldn't order a pot. They don't know what that term is.
How do you spell that?
Like pot, like POT. That's a half pour
pot of
in
beer.
Yeah, that's a half pour in Victoria in southern Australia. And then you go to other places outside Australia and they don't call it that. So I really enjoy the regionalism of beer glassware and naming and what you call a pint, or is it a real pint? It's always really cool and interesting, especially when you travel.
Well, in England and in Germany, there's a regulation that you have to put the volume of the beer on the glass.
Yeah.
Whereas we don't have such a regulation here.
Yeah, I had a friend from England move to New York, and they gave him less than the full pour, and he went up and asked for a top up because that's what you would do in England. And the bartender was like, "You're a moron."
You're right, exactly.
I'm not going to give you more beer. That's not
well.
how
The English are pretty resolute in what they expect, and I've read several things and talked to people about the fact that they feel that they're cheated if there's too big a head. On the
Mhm.
other hand, I like the head, and and also I like the smaller glass because I tend not to want to drink a huge volume. And but I think if you fill the glass up without having any head, you're depriving yourself of the pleasure of the visual aspect of the beer with the head, contrasting the beer itself and the aromatic aspect of the beer,
Yeah.
which is intensified by having a head.
Yeah, foam is very important. I'm always a big fan of just, a couple and two, usually an inch or two of foam is always very important. I call it the helmet of the beer.
The best beer glasses in the UK, they do actually have ones where there is the fill line, but there's still room above the fill line for a foam cap.
Yeah.
So those are the ones I like.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I think most of them are that way now. There's room above the fill. The fill line is not the top of the glass.
Yeah.
But the consumer doesn't always know that, particularly after he's had a few pints of beer, and insist that they fill it to the top, or they're cheated, or they feel cheated, I should say. They're not cheated.
Don, did you have any more questions?
No, this was fascinating. Love it.
I want to, Charles, if you have time, or like, if you have, a book, or I'd love to see some pictures, or you know what, I think more importantly is Don and I should go to Seattle.
Yes.
Yeah, I'd be happy to introduce you to that priest that's providing
I don't know
absolution.
I don't know if I want to meet that priest.
Well, this is a pretty arcane subject that you asked me
Yeah.
to speak about. I mean, I've been interviewed a lot of times about beer, but never about the vessels themselves. And I'm happy to. It challenges me a little bit to consider your questions.
Well, good. We're very happy that you came on. Where can people learn about yourself and Pike Brewing, or anything else you'd like to?
Well, Pike Brewing has a good website, pikebrewing.com. And the Charles Finkel has a Wikipedia. I have a Wikipedia page that you could probably learn more about me than that you want to, and just look online, and there are lots of photographs of me and of my wife Roseanne, who sadly died about 3 years ago, and we were a team. And so a lot of the photographs that you would see on there would have both of them in them. In fact, a local magazine, Seattle Magazine, contacted me and asked me to be on the cover of their magazine. And I said, well, I come with a team member, my wife Roseanne, and if you want to take my picture, please do it with her. And the person that asked me said, well, I've got to talk to the editor first. So she talked to the editor, and Roseanne and I ended up on the cover of the magazine.
Oh, beautiful. That's wonderful.
So it just look Charles Finkel on the internet, and you'll once again find a lot of stuff.
Awesome. Well, Charles, thank you so much for your time. And I look forward to seeing what other glasses you procure, because you're quite the collector.
When you come, I'll invite you over to my house as well, and you'll see some of the other ones that I have.
Oh, we would love
Awesome.
that. Well,
But anyone could go to Pike and see the
Yeah.
wall of tankards on the First Avenue level, and more tankards down in the pub, which is one level below.
And it's a very unique experience. I highly recommend anyone go to Pike for the beer and the history. It's a fascinating, wonderful place that you've created. So thank you for that.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, and thank you for your time.
Good to talk to you, Em.
Cheers, Charles.
Bye.
Cheers. Don, what'd you think about that show? I mean, I'm all thinking about Glassware now.
I loved it. This is exactly the type of stuff I love, as you know.
Oh my God, I
the
know.
whole psychology of flavor and everything. And so yeah, mind blown. Are you gonna stop drinking out of a juice jar
never.
now? Or
Never. What I am going to do though is I have a built-in in my dining room full of glassware I never use. Pilsner Urquell mugs, the Belgian glassware, things I always think are too fancy. and I'm going to give those a nice wash, and I'm going to start using them in my regular rotation because they really do. I think they elevate the drinking experience. So it should really, they shouldn't just sit there and collect dust. They
No.
should be used. So
Waste not, want not, right? So
Absolutely.
you gotta use them.
Yes. So visit allaboutbeer.com and follow us on social media at allaboutbeer. And if you're feeling generous, visit our Patreon, patreon.com/allaboutbeer to support this show and others. If you have any questions for the experts, email podcast@allaboutbeer.com. That's also the email for feedback, suggestions, or to inquire about supporting the show through advertising. Speaking of advertising, here's a short word from our sponsors.
Attention all managers and team leaders. Are you looking to provide your staff with the best training in the beer industry? Look no further than the Beer Savvy Online by the Cicerone Certification Program. With their online training, your team can master the fundamentals of excellent beer service, beer styles, and flavor in just a few hours. Plus, you can monitor their learning progress as a manager. And here's some exciting news. Saturday, April 22nd, is Beer Clean Glass Day, a day that celebrates the importance of clean glassware in beer service. What better way to mark this occasion by ensuring your team is well trained in all aspects of beer service, including maintaining clean glassware? By completing the Beer Savvy course, your team can earn a globally recognized beer industry credential and set your business apart as a leader in the industry. To learn more about Beer Savvy Online and group training options, visit cicerone.org and click on the group training button. Give your staff the tools they need to succeed in the beer industry today.
All About Beer is back, and we're asking for your support to help provide the independent beer media this rich and colorful industry deserves. Visit our website, allaboutbeer.com, where we're frequently posting new content. And please consider throwing us a few bucks at patreon.com/allaboutbeer. We have low-cost memberships for individuals and small and large companies alike. Every dollar goes to help produce new articles and podcasts.
Estrella Galicia is an independent family-owned brewery in northwest Spain, founded in 1906. Estrella Galicia Cerveza Especial is a world-class lager brewed using the finest Spanish malts, locally cultivated Galician hops, and the best brewing practices made out of the state-of-the-art facility in A Coruna. Recognized around the world for quality and exceptional character, Estrella Galicia is a beer like no other. To learn more about Estrella Galicia, follow them at Estrella Galicia USA on Instagram.
Before we go, if you like this podcast, one easy thing you can do to help us is give us a 5-star review on your favorite podcasting app. That helps other people find the show. We would also appreciate it if you would let your beer-loving friends know about the All About Beer podcast to help us spread the gospel of good beer. So, Don, how can people reach out to you?
On Twitter and Instagram, I'm at the Dawn of Beer, and people can feel free to email me at dawn@thedawnofbeer.com. How about you?
I am at Pints and Panels across all social media, and my website is www.pintsandpanels.com. This show is produced by All About Beer. Visit allaboutbeer.com for articles, notes on this show and others, and to connect via the newsletter and social media. Cheers!
Cheers!